welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Stephen Lewellis. Thanks for joining us today, Stephen.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Oh, well, you're welcome, and I'm like super happy to have you.
Thank you.
So I usually start by saying how we met, and we connected on LinkedIn at some point in the spring or early summer. I'm not exactly sure when, and I kind of became, I don't know what you call it, like an honorary member or a tag along to that group you were a part of where you would like support each other's posts and stuff, because I happened to have connected with each of you, and I kind of found myself tagging along. So that's how we kind of followed each other. And I think you always share such interesting posts, and your feedback to others is always on point. You know, I love seeing your comments. You do a really good job.
Thank you very much. I was so happy that you came into my life as a result of that. You are such a connector at heart and an advocate, as you both call yourself and truly are as a calling at this point in your life because of the story that you've shared. And I just started seeing your name pop up here and there, and I didn't know who it was at first, but the more I got to know you from those simply comments and posts and just being genuine, being ourselves, using a social media platform for good rather than for having arguments and sort of shouting at each other from behind a screen. And that is why this platform, I feel like it's a secret almost that it's such a wonderful platform, because I think a lot of people, when they hear LinkedIn, they don't necessarily have thoughts like that about it. So I think the professionals, especially the physicians who have embraced it, I think are really getting a lot of benefit, and they're adding to each other. It's a whole rising tides type of thing. So I'm grateful that you came into my life that way.
Yeah, well, thank you. I am too. So that was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a great way to put it. So this is a shout out if anybody here isn't on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
give it a try. There's a lot of wonderful doctors and people sharing, just important things. And it's really terrific.
It's a good, I don't mean to interrupt. It's a good place to for doctors or for anyone to spend some time on social media without getting the typical anxiety or FOMO or other emotions that we often associate with it. I come out of my time on LinkedIn usually feeling great, feeling rejuvenated, feeling like I did something positive and actually created something also, rather than just consuming. And I'm also supporting people at the same time. So I post almost every day, of course, but I also spend quite a bit of time engaging with others, and that helps me both as a thinker and a writer. It helps me learn things, but I know it's also helping those people, and that's a great thing to be able to do. And it's not just scrolling scroll. It's so much different than the typical thing you might think of with social media. So I really do think that's great. Neither of us have any LinkedIn disclosures or anything. We're just fans of the platform for how it sort of differentiates itself. But go ahead.
Okay, no, sure. Let's see. So, continuing on, when we initially met, in August, I told you I was very moved by the podcast you did with Dr. Michael Hirsch and Dr. Peter Gupta De Palma, and I invited you to collaborate on the first of a group of articles I had an idea about to submit to Kevin MD, and you graciously agreed, and we titled it "Message of Hope for Physicians," and I have it right here.
Love it.
And we did that with Doctors Jillian Rigger and Dr. Diana Londonio. And Kevin published it on September 17th, which was National Physician Suicide Awareness Day, which made it extra meaningful to all four of us. And I've already had Jillian and Diana as guests here on my show. And we strategically waited to feature you here today, as you've been transitioning to opening your own practice. And we
yes, absolutely.
For that.
Thank you.
And then you and I did a podcast with Kevin about our article, and then we got off the podcast and talked for an hour.
We did. It was great. So that was a delight. Yeah.
So it's by way of introducing you, Dr. Stephen Lewellis is a board-certified medical dermatologist serving patients of all ages in a virtual direct care integrative dermatology model. He helps people struggling with acute and chronic skin diseases earn back the quality of life they deserve. Stephen is also the creator and host of the Direct Care Derm podcast. Outside of his medical practice, Stephen is passionate about strengthening the collective voice of physicians on social media, educating fellow physicians, including residents, about personal finance and life planning, investing in private real estate and other businesses, and building businesses. You're a busy guy, Stephen.
I try to keep busy with things that I enjoy, especially, and I have that gift right now, which is nice.
Yeah, well, that's terrific. So today we'll be talking about Stephen's thoughts about the critical nature of sharing our stories, and I love that. And his best tip from our article to his colleagues, create more than you consume. And there's a lot that we can dive into in relation to that, and we'll take it from there. So what would you most like our audience to know about you as we begin our conversation?
Well, thank you for your platform and sharing your audience with me, first of all, and for that very kind introduction. The timing is nice because I've given myself a deadline of the end of January for getting my new practice up and running. And in terms of having an MVP, as they call it in the entrepreneur space, a minimum viable product, I have that. There's no fancy website yet. I'm going through a branding process, and I'm being strategic about that. But I do have all the nuts and bolts in place to actually see anyone in Wisconsin via a telehealth model. And I'm actually doing some free visits at this point just to help work out the kinks, optimize workflow in return for the grace that any patients would be willing to give me in that regard. I am in turn doing the work pro bono for now, but it's totally official. All the insurances are in place. It's an official kind of patient-physician relationship, prescriptions, all of that. So that we can put some things, some links or anything like that later on. But at this point, I'll just tell you at the end of the episode how to reach out to me. And that's how people could reach out to me, since there isn't the website up and running yet.
Okay.
So stories, you mentioned that. That's one of the reasons that I started my podcast, because I know that as humans, we nurture each other with our stories. And so many, especially doctors and advocates like you and people who are in anywhere in allied health, have so many stories to share, whether it's through their work in healthcare or through being a patient or an advocate of a patient, anything like that. And the more and more these stories are starting to come out, the more empathy people have for each other on all sides of it. If you read my stuff, you'll see me throwing stones at big insurance companies and big hospital systems and all that. But I still know that if I was to have a C-suite member of United Healthcare on my show, they would tell me stories that I could empathize with.
Right.
And we are all just trying to do our jobs. Our system is messed up right now, and there's a lot of us who are trying to push it in the right direction. And I think those stories help us get people's attention rather than just, banging our fist and saying, this isn't right, we need change. It's a way of activating change and getting someone's attention so that they will then consider, what you're even talking about or what you're asking to be changed. So that's why I love hearing those stories, and the podcasting medium is just perfect for it, because you have a little extra time. It doesn't have to be a video, but it can be a video, which I love doing, because seeing people's emotions as well is wonderful. And you can really just get to know people. And that's really why I think the stories are so critical. And as part of my practice, I want to get to know people and their stories. And that's why I moved from insurance, where it was a high volume, lots of patients, little time, to much fewer patients, much more time with each patient. And that's what will, in my opinion, restore the trust and the therapeutic part of the therapeutic physician-patient relationship, is that time and the desire on the physician's part to really know a person. And that's what really gets the ball rolling and lights on fire that transformation journey for a patient. So that's where I'm going. I know not every single person who needs a dermatologist needs an hour with one. Some people need just 5 minutes, and the insurance model isn't going to go away, and it works. It's appropriate for some situations, but I'm serving a population of people who aren't being served by that model.
I love that. Yeah. And speaking to the stories, it does seem like since the pandemic, when things got even worse for physicians,
Hmm.
that they have started opening up a little more. And like I've said, I don't know who said it first, but like every time a physician shares their story, another physician feels less alone, so that
Yeah.
everyone is talking about now, struggles that they had in medical school or residency, which you've spoken to yourself.
Hmm.
And I just think that that's so important, because a lot of them, even to this day, might have thought, well, I was alone, and that it was only me. And they're
Yes.
realizing that's not the case.
Yes, we're so much more alike than we know, and it is much more the norm to feel a lot of struggle especially on the road to becoming a physician and then actually being a physician. So it's the it's the exception to be feeling fine. That would be
Hmm.
very bizarre to go through this very rigorous training, so much different than all of your other friends coming out of college and things like that. And then stepping out of that into actual work as a physician. And then the pandemic, like you said, so many of us, especially those of us on the front lines. I interviewed recently on my show, it's not, the episode isn't out yet, but Dr. Dhaval Desai, who wrote a book about his experience on the front lines and burning out on the front lines during
Right.
COVID. And it was such an extraordinary and difficult experience for so many of those docs who truly were on the front lines. And I was not.
Hmm.
I was watching YouTube videos about what the heck I was going to do if I had to be in the ICU as a dermatologist.
Right.
And because that was a very real possibility. I was horrified and
Yeah.
for myself and for people, to be honest, but I was still
Right.
trying to, but I didn't have to do that. And I'm so grateful for the people who did, and
Right.
especially those of them who were lost. And people came out of it, wanting to tell their stories and nourish and care for each other through those stories. And you have your story and your story of your relationship with your physician and friend who you lost, and that is going to nourish so many other people as well. Dr. Kara Pepper, her show, I think is called it's not I don't want to get this wrong, but maybe it's something like It's Not Just You. And that is
Hmm.
just so, she says it's
Uh-huh.
not just you. I always say it doesn't have to be this way. So many of those things, we just need to hear them again and again rather than
Right.
constantly hearing the cynicism and negativity, which is all I ever heard during residency and medical school. It was all
Mhm.
just cynics and negative stuff that I was hearing.
Right. And it normalizes it, and the more people that are
Yeah.
saying, because if you keep hearing it over and over and
Yes.
over again, because the first time somebody shares it, it might sound a little bit vulnerable. But then
Yeah.
when you keep hearing it over and, different variations of the same thing,
Yeah.
it normalizes talking about it. And I think that's really critical.
Well, that's the therapy. Yeah, that is how we deal with so many of these things. Some of them don't even need much more than just talking, and
Mhm.
that alone is such a big step for many people, especially me. I'm learning through my work on my own self through
Mhm.
therapy that I did not do for the first almost 4 decades of my life, but I'm learning how growing up as a sort of an avoidant type of person who would suppress those kind of things or
Mhm.
not want to be confrontational or something like that. How that's not my fault. That's not anyone's fault. That's just how it is, and that informs just my different parts of my life and how I can adapt and change with that knowledge. And someone who's naturally avoidant telling their story and stepping into
Mhm.
that is so therapeutic because you have so much built up in you that you haven't shared over time.
Right, right, right. So you're helping yourself. It's healing for you, and it's
Yeah,
healing for other
for
people at
sure.
the same time. So
Yes.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. So I do think it's so important that we're sharing our stories, and we're doing that today.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
for
then
sure.
in the article, I had asked each of you to share your best tip for your colleagues,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and you had said create more than
Mm.
you consume, and that
Yes.
was that was it. And also, you would mention to me that creating is a way of sharing our story. So, if you wanted to speak about that and creating
You
more than
bet.
you consume.
I'd be happy to. The thing that had always frustrated me a little bit until what feels like the last year or so, especially the last 6 months, given an abrupt transition in my life that I've spoken about and happy to speak about again, is the feeling that I didn't have anything to contribute, to create, to
Mm,
say. It wasn't feeling natural. I always thought it'd be great if I could write something or create something, but I don't, it doesn't, it feels really hard. It doesn't feel like it's there. Uh, but eventually I just hit a tipping point where I had consumed enough stuff, enough good stuff too, not just
mm-hmm,
garbage. And
mm-hmm,
then there was that tipping point where it was almost like an on-off switch. It just started, ideas
mm,
started coming, and I would write them down, and then go. I started with a practice on LinkedIn. I just committed. I said I'm going to
mm,
post as often as I can, maybe 5 days a week is a goal, and that's really hard. It's so
mm,
to do something original every day, whether you're planning in advance or doing it the night before, whatever it is, it's very challenging. But if you hold yourself to that and have some grace, not every week is going to be your nature goal. But I wrote something like 100, and I think probably at this point, since in 6 months, it's around 120 or so
wow.
unique pieces of
Yes.
creativity, right? And that has gone so far in helping me both connect with people
Mm-hmm,
and create those new connections, but also just from a very practical sense, I am on my own as a physician now. I am my own business. I am responsible for getting people who want my expertise in my door.
right.
And the biggest crutch that physicians have is the insurance, the sort of big insurance complex, and that's why they are able to take such advantage of us and reduce rates constantly and ask for more and more documentation, all of this because they are so sure that we're not just going to say enough. I don't need
Mm-hmm,
you anymore.
mm-hmm,
Because when you turn off that tap and you don't have more
mm-hmm,
patients than you could ever imagine caring for coming into your office without trying at all in terms of
right,
marketing or branding, that's
right.
a big step. So for me, creating and putting myself out there is a way that I can develop this sort of know, like, trust factor with people who might be interested in seeing me. And that goes both ways. I want people to be able to say, I just don't vibe with this guy. He's not moving on. Great. That is a
Mm-hmm.
good thing. That you do not want to spend your money on someone that doesn't that you're not going to get a good connection with. But someone else might say, finally, like he's speaking my language. This is who I need to see, or this is who my son who's 15 and will not talk to me about his acne, but it's creating all these
Mm-hmm,
scars and he won't go on dates. He's got to see this
mm-hmm,
guy. So
mm-hmm,
that's from the much more not selfish but practical sense. I have a business.
right.
I want to care for myself financially and my family and have the stability eventually that we had when I was an employed physician. It will be a longer play, but
Mm-hmm,
all of that stuff is contributing to that. It's not just creating for the sake of creating, which is
mm-hmm,
great as well. So I still consume and create, but it makes me feel so much better about my day to day that I'm not just consuming. I'm also
right.
sort of creating whatever it is, whether you're typing, writing, art,
Uh-huh.
singing, it doesn't matter. Just create something, make something. And sharing it with people is a big part of it. A lot of people create and don't share it, but for me, sharing it and having those dialogues is a really great part about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think that we all do need some creativity in our life, right? And whether it's, taking pictures or planning
Hmm.
adventures or
Yeah.
painting or playing an instrument or something, right?
Hmm.
Just creating something. I think, yeah, that's really important.
It is.
That's great. So I watched or listened to the intro episode of your podcast,
Oh,
and I laughed out loud when you said, that you're starting with a small audience and, that it's okay to go from sucking to not sucking. And I was going to say that
yeah.
you don't suck. You're starting out from a very good place, but I didn't know if
Oh,
you
thanks.
wanted to speak to that at all.
Yeah, so thank you for the kind words, first of all. I just I wanted to make other people feel that they don't have to wait till they are really good at something to start putting it out there or start doing it. It's
Hmm.
that's the trap. You can't, it's the catch 22. You can't get good at it if you don't start doing it. You don't have
Mhm,
to start doing it in public. If I was learning guitar, for instance, I
mhm,
wouldn't be publishing my
mhm.
every practice session for the whole world to hear. It's a different kind of thing. But with podcasts, I felt a little more comfortable, at least because I had at least consumed so many of them over time, and I felt like I was ready enough, at least. So
Mhm.
but for everyone to normalize the idea that the first time you do something, you are supposed to suck at it, and it's
Yeah,
very
right.
or if you're really
To
good at it,
normalize that.
to normalize it. And and because my audience is primarily physicians, to think back about the time you saw you had your first uh, real like patient interaction, and you were
Mhm,
interviewing a real live human with who is suffering for the first time in your life. You probably don't want to watch the video of that if it's
uh-huh.
available. It was, but would probably make you cringe. But where would you be now if you never were willing to do that
Mhm.
first one? And with medical school, there's accountability. You have to do that or you don't move on and you
Right.
never graduate. So many of us are motivated by those extrinsic type of things. But where I am right now, there's nobody saying you have to get
Mhm,
on video and or you have to post this thing on LinkedIn, or you need to do this interview for your podcast, or you're not going to go to the next
mhm.
place and
Right, right.
eventually get a degree or whatever it is. Yeah, but I know internally that if I don't do those things, I'm going to have a successful business, I'm going to have to go back and get a job, and I will then have that misalignment burnout for the third time in my life. I will be in it with a big
Mhm,
company. I'll be doing a great job for patients. My staff and I will get along great, but I won't be aligned with the overall mission of the company. It's unlikely, at least, and that will cause problems for me and for them and everybody involved. So I desperately don't want to have to go back to that.
right, right. That, yeah. And I know that you're going to be successful. And actually, that
Thanks.
brings me to the next thing that you said in your podcast, either your podcast or in a post about your
Mhm.
business. I'm confident that I'll be successful, but that doesn't mean I don't have doubts. And to
Yeah,
just come out and say that, I think is
yeah.
really, again, normalizing it, right?
Yeah, it normalizes it for sure. And if we don't have some doubts, at least you got to think about why am I so confident in achieving this really hard thing? And there's a balance there, because if you think about professional athletes or Olympians at the top of they have to have this ultimate belief in themselves. You can't be
Hmm.
Simone Biles going down that to that vault and say I have some doubts about that. That is when she gets the yips and she doesn't know where
Right.
she is in the air, and it's extremely dangerous. But for a person just starting out building a business, it's very natural to have fears and doubts, and you just need to adopt the mindset of things are going to come up. Not, oh, bummer if like something goes wrong. Things
Hmm.
will go wrong. You
Right.
will figure it out and you'll move on, and you'll be much better at dealing with that type of problem the next time it happens. And then the more successful you become, the bigger the problems become, and hopefully you have a
Hmm.
team by then, and you just solve the next problem and you add it to your sort of toolkit of problems I've solved already and know how to solve. But the doubts will always be there, but I sort of look at them as it's good to have some doubts. It's good to have some humility, but
Hmm.
it's not about not believing in myself.
Right.
Because I do believe in myself, but I want to still have that balance there.
Mhm. No, that's great. And that all those things can be true at the same time.
Yes, exactly. We can hold them and exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that's terrific. I also liked in your intro podcast that you said to share it with one person in your life that you think might benefit from it. So I like
Yeah.
that the way too, that you're getting it out there, putting it out and say, hey, share this. And I think that was a really nice way to do that.
Thank you. And that could be looked at several ways. That's totally selfish on my end. The only way to grow a podcast is for more people to get exposed to it. So that's just basic marketing. I'm asking you to tell someone about it who you think might
Mhm.
benefit from it, and that benefits all parties. If they get something from it, great. and having additional listeners and downloads, subscribes, reviews, anything like that helps me, because my mission is ultimately getting this message to as many people who want to hear it as possible.
Mhm.
Not the whole, I don't want I'm not looking for 8 billion listeners. Like,
Yeah.
not everyone on the planet wants or needs to hear what I'm saying, but I want the people who are the people who will connect with me to find it. And that's the only way that it gets out beyond just my network and what I'm able to disseminate it to. So I like the podcasting medium in that way. There is sort of this law of reciprocity when you are getting something for free, which a lot of podcasts are. You have some what subconscious maybe obligation or whatever it is, or desire to compensate that person in some way. So share it, write it, make a review, rate it.
Mhm.
That is the best way to help a fledgling podcaster grow. So that's why I say it. And it's just every person who teaches you how to make a podcast will say that anyway. You have to ask for those things. You have to have calls to
Right.
action, things like this. It gets in the weeds, but you have to be willing to ask your audience for what you need.
Right. And that makes me think of those ripples that Dr. Todd Otten
Yes.
talks about, right? Ripples of change, right?
Wonderful.
And
He's
that's what
so
you
good.
said, even
Yes.
just one person, and then they tell someone,
Yeah.
and it goes, on and
Yeah.
on. Those
And
ripples
you
of change.
never know. I love Dr. Otten and Joshua Judy's metaphor of the ripples of change, because I always think about there's all these ripples, but when the ripples bounce and collide, and you
Yes.
never know which ripples are going to collide and have that additive effect and become a bigger
Yeah.
thing. And some ripples that collide aren't going to do much, but some will be that real synergy that
Mhm.
it really changes things. And that's just why I really love that imagery that they made, and their quadruple aim. Everything that they're
Mhm.
doing is fantastic. And I understand that I don't mean to interview you on your own show, but you have are working with in terms of community engagement or something like
Yeah,
that
medicine
with them.
forward.
A
And
medicine
that's
forward.
in some
Okay.
of that. I think it's kind of what you're talking about is now we're kind of finding each other. I
Yeah.
connected them and then now
Yeah.
tell the doctors, hey, come to medicine forward. And then, they'll
Yes.
be on it. So I think we're starting to connect exactly what you're
Gotcha.
talking about. We're
Yeah.
seeing. So yeah, I'm the
Yeah.
community ambassador for medicine forward. So right now I'm
Wonderful.
welcoming new members.
Good. That's wonderful. And yeah, it's going to be eventually we are all what we're doing going to hit a tipping point where that it's going
Mhm.
to get more and more and more attention, and the people who have really have a lot of power are going to have to start paying attention, which is great.
Mhm. Yep, I agree. This is true. Do
Mm.
you have any top tips that you'd like to share for your colleagues, from seasoned physicians to medical students or even those considering med school?
I would love to start from the in reverse order there. For those considering med school, if you want to do it, do it. There is so much, at least when I was coming up, of physicians who would say, I'd never tell my kids to do this. I tell my kids not to go into medicine. And that's so disheartening. And it's not for everybody. You shouldn't don't go into medicine for someone else.
Right.
Go to medical school if you want to go to medical school. If you're doing it for someone else, it is a painful path to go. Uh, but if you feel it in you that that's what you want to do it. And you don't have to just get your medical degree and get a job and go get burned out. Like, it can feel you can really have a wonderful career and take charge of it and make it your own. And there's so much there to do, but you have to be willing to build it and figure it out. So yes, go to medical school if you feel that calling, and don't be discouraged by all the talk of burnout, because for as much talk about burnout as there's these conversations like
Mhm.
this that are becoming more and more to crowd out that space of despair. Uh,
Mhm.
Medical students and residents maybe start building your brand as soon as possible. If you're a person who says, "Oh, I don't have a brand. I don't, branding is a marketing icky kind of thing," you have a brand. You
Mhm.
just are either curating it or someone else is curating it for you. So start that as early as possible with whatever feels comfortable to you. And your brand is as simple as the way you interact with people. It doesn't have to be an active, like, I'm doing a branding thing right now.
Mhm.
It's just that what the things you do consistently over time, that's your brand. So that's why it can be bad or good. And as you start to build that, if it's something that, if you're interested in a certain area, reach out to people. Use LinkedIn, for instance. Bryce Bowers, Dr. Bowers, who's a resident physician now, whom we both know. I just interviewed for him for my show, and will be coming out in a few weeks probably, is already doing wonderful things as a resident physician, and that's very possible. And his story is incredible, and a lot of people are going to be nourished and maybe even saved by it. So for them, that's what I would encourage. And on the, you mentioned, I like to do sort of financial advice and life planning type of advice for those people, because there's so many easy things you can just get in place and set it and forget it early in your life, to just put that stuff on autopilot for 5 decades, and you are going to be blown away if you are lucky enough to get to there at what can happen with extremely little effort and expense on your part. But it just takes a little work at the beginning. Just get one good book about it. You know, Ramit Sethi has a wonderful one called "I Will Teach You to Be Rich." It's a clickbaity title, but it is exactly what it is. I will teach you. That's the book. He teaches it. It's a system. It's set it and forget it. It's not about fancy stuff. It's about all the things you can just put in the background and put on autopilot for your whole life. And the earlier you start doing that, even if you feel like you don't have any money to save or invest, put the systems in place, and that money will grow over time, and the money you're able to put away will grow. And then other things like insurance and estate planning, if you have a family, all of that stuff, you just need to start thinking about it. And oftentimes you need someone who's been there to tell you about it, because I didn't start thinking about it till residency, until someone who was ahead of me gave us a talk like that. So that, and then people in my position, just follow your heart. Miss Ali Abdal, who is a doctor in the UK, has a book called Feel Good Productivity. He's no longer a practicing physician. He's a sort of productivity guru on YouTube, essentially, a huge following. And he describes 3 types of burnout. And one of them that resonates most with me is misalignment. The other one is exertion. The other 2 are exertion and depletion. But misalignment burnout is that one that grates at you without sort of realizing it. And those were the ones that I experienced most, and the reason I don't want to have to go back to a place where I'm not in control anymore. So for the practicing physicians, it doesn't have to be this way. If you're not feeling aligned, it is going to cause you problems, even if it's not causing them yet, or you're likely just not admitting that it's causing you problems. Or so that, as you know, I can be pretty long-winded, but I wanted to address all 3 of those populations.
I think that's all fantastic, worthwhile advice. So thank you for sharing all of it.
You're very welcome. Happy to.
So how can our listeners get in touch with you?
You bet. So a little bit complicated with the practice right now, but LinkedIn is a wonderful place to go. Stephen Lewellis, I'm the only Stephen Lewellis on there. And Instagram or other platforms, you can usually find me at Lewellis, my last name, MD as in medical doctor. So at Lewellis MD, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of the typical platforms for that. And again, lewellismd@gmail.com is a wonderful email address. If you want to say, hey, he said free dermatology appointment, is that right? Let me reach out to this guy. So I'm only licensed in Wisconsin currently, so it would be only for Wisconsin residents at this point, but I will soon have a formal website. It's a telemedicine only virtual practice, direct care practice. And right now I'm just doing some complimentary visits to work out the kinks. Eventually I will be expanding strategically to other states and serving as many people as I can who have a lot of skin stuff doesn't have to be dealt with in person. And that's the group I'm trying to capture.
Okay, well, that's all terrific. And thank you again for being my guest today, Stephen. I was so happy to have you, and I'm rooting for you. And I know that you're going to be very successful, and I'm excited to watch your journey, continue watching your journey.
Thank you so much, Kim. You're such a light and one of the types of people who you feel energized after talking to you. And that someone said recently, I forget who it was, but something about that, like that person, some people come with batteries included. I think it's Dan Sullivan, maybe. And you're the type of person who comes with batteries included. I don't have to give you my energy to me, and you're actually giving it to me. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. And I am just glad you're again sharing your story and allowing others on your platform now. Congratulations on what you've built already. The momentum, even though you just started a couple months ago, right? But I
Yeah.
feel like you probably have a list, a waiting list,
I
or
do. Well,
waiting
like
room
60
about 100
doctors.
people long or something. Exactly. So that's a testament to you, and there's going to be so many people helped by this. So thank you for allowing me to have that platform. And yeah, to anyone in your audience, please feel free to reach out to me. That email address is great, or any other way you want to connect with me.
Okay, well, that's terrific. And I think everybody knows they can find me on LinkedIn. And
Yes.
please click like or subscribe because I've got many more great guests to come myself.
You sure do.
And so in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.
Wonderful.